Esther chapter 4, verses 11 through 17. It says, "All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die unless the king holds out his gold scepter. And the king has not called for me to come to him for 30 days. So some very hard biblical name gave Esther's message to Mordecai. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther, 'Don't think for a moment that because you're in this palace, you will escape when all other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will rise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made for just such a time as this?' Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, 'Go and gather all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, nights or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though is it against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die.' So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him." The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, first I want to make a couple of acknowledgments. I'm so excited to be here, first off. I got two amazing parents out in the crowd. I got my grandma here, my auntie. I got some of my Project Regalia girls out here. And a couple more familiar faces and a few friends that are out here to support me. So I'm very thankful for that. I want to pray before we begin, so if you'll pray with me. Dear God, thank you for waking me up this morning, putting clothes on my back and food on our table, and allowing us to see another day. Thank you for calling me to faith and putting a word in my heart. Thank you for calling me to service to share the good news with others. As it is time for me to take the stage and move out the way so that they only see you that's inside of me. Don't let me block the view. That's not what I desire to do. Lord, I ask that they see you. Amen.
Amen.
All right, so first off, my name is Jayla Gregory. I didn't say that at the beginning. I'm a freshman here at the University of Indianapolis, so some of you may know me, but many of you may not. My title is My Testimony, but it is not finished yet. So I remember attending New Hounds Day and sitting in the auditorium with a very sore throat while also running off about 2 hours of sleep. Now that's nothing abnormal. Me and my mom, we do this about every weekend still. We stay up all night watching movies, watching TV, knowing we got church the next morning. I remember my dad and I listening to many speakers talk about how wonderful UND is and the importance of being a freshman here in UND. Throughout New Hounds Day, we had a couple of breaks, and it was during one of the breaks that my dad was so eager to come back and report to me that he had met a young lady who said that she's a chaplain here at the university. He talked about the conversation they had about the faith-based here on campus. She then proceeded to tell him about a new type of service that will be implemented for the upcoming school year, a traditional African-American church service, what we now call our Monday evening chapel service. I am so excited to see how far this service has grown, and to now be a part of it is truly a blessing. Thank you, Chaplain Ari and UC as well. So I won't lie and say that ever since I have been asked to speak, a million butterflies have been swarming in my stomach. I am not a preacher, just a young lady who is eager to speak to you about my testimony, but I want to be authentic as possible. I remember one day my brother telling me, "One day you're going to have to tell your story." I thought to myself, although that might be true, what is my story? I had to take a step back and realize we all have a story to tell. My story started way before I could even talk. I was born on December 26, 1999, and I like to consider myself a miracle baby. I was born weighing only 3 pounds and 7 ounces. In medical terms, that was considered as being premature. I used to be so self-conscious in talking about me being premature, not realizing that was just the beginning of my story. It didn't stop there. At 6 months, I began to have health complications. My parents noticed that my breathing was shallow. After many hospital stays and a switch in physicians, the diagnosis was discovered by Dr. Yancey, who is still my doctor today. Dr. Yancey stated that my breathing problems that was affecting my body was due to a medical condition known as pulmonary spleen. This condition affected my heart and upper respiratory system. I immediately went under surgery, and I can now stand here and say that I have been healthy ever since. Minus a few colds here and there. Now this is like the next phase of my life, but it's still the phase that I'm in, and that's being a PK. If y'all don't know what a PK stands for, that stands for preacher's kid. Growing up in a Christian household where my dad has been in ministry for nearly 30 years and pastoring for 19 years. Hopefully I get to hear him speak sometime in the spring. It has enlightened me a lot regarding my faith. In the beginning, it was though I was only taught to believe in what was being portrayed. However, now as I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize that building my own personal relationship with my faith will soon make it easier in putting Christ at the center of my life. I can tell you the question that I get asked the most: what is it like being a preacher's daughter? And I'll let you in on something. It mostly comes from boys. I don't know if they're just intimidated by it. But I'm never afraid to let them know that's what I am. I can honestly say that it hasn't always been perfect where people define as picture perfect in their head. A lot of people see the preacher's kids as the worst type of children you could possibly have. And there's this one show out not too long ago. It's called Preacher's Daughter. It's horrific. I don't know if y'all seen it or not. But they basically put us in the light that, just not realistic. And like most reality shows, that's where it stems from. So, obviously that wasn't real either. I was determined not to be labeled as that. I am blessed with two parents that never put pressure on me not to live out my youth just because I was born into that label. When I was younger, I put a lot of pressure on myself, thinking that since I am a preacher's daughter, I had to be perfect. Obviously, there has some truth to it. The only perfect one is Jesus Christ. And even Jesus is not afraid to proclaim that he had to go through some things. And of course, all that suffering that he was put through was for us to be here today. As I got older, I started to get over the title of being a preacher's daughter. I stopped putting so much pressure on myself of my idea of perfect. I still like to have fun, listen to my music, So I am still a young Christian adult who is constantly growing in Christ. Now, this is another phase throughout my life I'd like to take you guys on. Throughout life, I've had many humbling moments, I'm sure like you all have had as well. I'm the youngest out of two sisters and one brother. So I might be just a tad bit spoiled, but I am the baby. I can recall a specific moment in my life that happened not too long ago. My parents always made sure that a way was provided, and I never wanted for nothing. This was until we hit a rough patch in summer of 2017. It was a Saturday night. My mother and I was on the couch watching a movie. This is a routine that we did every weekend, and most of the time, we still do. We would both have something to drink and a bag of buttery popcorn. This night I said, "Mommy, wasn't that funny?" I looked over at my mom who had a blank face at the funny scene that was shown on the TV screen. She then began to cry as she couldn't feel one side of her face. My mother, being the strongest person I know, somehow pressed through the next 24 hours. The next morning was a sunny, bright Sunday. In the Gregory household, church comes first and leisure activities come afterward. This morning, my mom couldn't participate in either one. So after church service, my dad took my mother to the hospital. Later that evening, I remember looking at the movie screen and laughing like there was no tomorrow, until I looked down at my phone and had over 10 missed calls from my father. I already knew this wasn't going to be good news. As I pressed the contact name, my heart felt as though it was going to pump out of my chest. My dad stated that my mother had suffered a mini stroke and was placed on bed rest. I remember shaking and trembling, forgetting all about the movie that made me laugh from the gut of my belly. All I could feel was my heart sink to the bottom of my stomach and tears sting my eyes. My family is known for keeping it together. We never let our head drop. We are way too strong for that. I knew God was going to test us to see how strong we really were. Throughout this whole journey, there were times when I questioned, was God even there? I couldn't stop my faith from shaking until I started to see my mother recover. This was just one of the many stories that had shaken our foundation in the summer of 2017. Now this is another moment. It was a normal school day. I would come home, eat, tell my parents about my day, and take a nap. I pulled up in my apartment complex parking lot, walked to the front door, only to be greeted by a yellow paper. I remember shrugging and just thinking that this was just another paper hanging on the outside of our door. I walked in the house and set the yellow paper down. My parents were sitting on the couch in our living room doing what they normally do and watching TV. They proceeded to ask me how my day was. My dad then got up from the couch and went into the kitchen and pulled out the skillet to make his cheesy grilled cheese sandwich. He knows that's my favorite. I watched as he did so while also telling them about all the encounters at school. I watched as they were listening, and my dad put the 2 pieces of bread and butter in the skillet. And with both hands on his hips, he walks over to where the bright yellow paper was placed. I watched him swallow hard and take a glance at my mother. By her eyes, I could already tell she knew she could read my father's thoughts. I've always been a curious child. I was never scared to ask what was going on. My mother said that this was an eviction notice paper and that we had 24 hours to remove all of our things from our apartment. My mind began to play back on how I woke up this morning and went on about my day as normal and not thinking that any of this was happening. My parents never let on that money was ever an issue. Therefore, this was something I could not understand. On top of this, my mom was just recently released from the hospital, and now we are here. The only question I could ask God was, why? I thank God for placing people in our life that were there for us throughout that whole entire experience. Being without a home for 3 months only made my connection to God that much stronger. I must admit, there were times when we felt like giving up. However, God reminded us to put our faith in Him and He would see us through. And that is exactly what was shown to my parents tonight. God came through in a mighty way. If we had given up, we would not be here with all of you today. I can now look back and say I am forever grateful for that experience. So earlier we read Esther 4:11 through 17. Esther has always been my favorite book in the Bible. It was something about her story that always caused a gravitation in my spirit. My favorite part of that passage is when Mordecai stated, "Perhaps you were created for such a time as this." I know at times you feel as though life gets unbearable. Have you ever thought that perhaps you were created for such a time as this? This specific message has come to fruition, which is I am standing here and ministering to you all about my life story. Esther stepped out of her comfort zone, but not only did she do that, she stepped out on faith. Sometimes stepping out on faith means stepping out of our comfort zone. You see, what's comfortable to you may not always be what's right for you.
That's right.
We know that a decree was sent out to find a new queen. Esther, being a beautiful young woman who was also an orphan, was sent to live in the king's palace. Some of us are even too scared to be an ambassador for Jesus. Esther had to be scared, realizing that she had to leave her old life behind her. And I want to highlight that she had to leave her old life behind her. Some of us need to leave some things behind us in order for us to be repositioned. She couldn't have known how things was all going to go down, but like always, God is behind the scenes working on our behalf. Throughout the book of Esther, we notice that the chain of events were just lined up a little too perfect. This is what we call God's perfect timing. You know when things are going a little too right and you like, hold up, God, what you got going on? It's important that we don't question Him and we let Him continue to work in our lives. God put Esther and Mordecai in the position to save His people from destruction. Although it may be some destruction that's going on in your life, know that God is setting up a couple events that is going to call for you to be in position to be a lifesaver. Another one of my favorite parts of that passage is verse 16. Esther says, I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. This is what I like to call boldness in the face of uncertainty and adversity. We must remember that Esther was just an orphan who became queen, and she's now fighting to save her people.
Yeah.
She fasted and prayed for 3 days before putting God's plan into action. This showed Esther's obedience and letting God take total control of her life. I know it's easier said than done, but if we can begin to realize that all this worrying can go away if we learn to let Him have total control of our lives. I want to leave you with this, and that is trust that God isn't finished writing your story. However, you must give Him total control to do so. The outcome of Esther's boldness was that she was welcomed by Ahasuerus, and the Jews were saved from destruction. And the wicked man Hangman, well, he was hung on the gallows that he specifically had made for Mordecai. Esther had a story, and just like Esther, each one of you have a story too. Learn to trust God and know that He loves you so much. Know that you can rest in His guidance and wisdom for your life. Be willing to take that step of faith, step out of your comfort zone, and be obedient to what God asks of you, and continue to live the life of faith and let Him continue to write your story.